Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this planning subcommittee meeting. My name is Barbara Blake. I'm the chair of this committee and I'm a Seven Sisters ward councillor. If we can have introductions of the committee first, so starting from my left and working round, please.
Leisure Ray, Stockton Hill councillor.
Nicola Bartlett, West Green councillor.
Councillor John Bevan, Northumberland Park.
Lester Buxton, Crouch End councillor.
Councillor Pippa Connor, Muswell Hill ward.
Councillor Ajo, Northumberland Park ward.
Councillor Yvonne Say, White Hart Lane.
Mark White, Tottenham Central councillor.
Alex Worrell, councillor for Stroud Green.
George Dunstall, councillor for Stroud Green as well.
Thank you. And if the officers can introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Suzanne Kimman, climate change officer.
Good evening, Matthew Barrett, Legal Services.
Rob Shasovsky, Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability.
Robbie McKnocker, Head of Development Management.
Chris Smith, Principal Planning Officer.
Fiona Ray, Acting Committees Manager.
And Richard Truscott, Design Officer.
Thank you. And some officers are in attendance virtually, so I'll let them introduce themselves when relevant. So we're on to item 1, that's filming at meetings. This meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. Item 2, planning protocol. Members and speakers are requested to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda. Apologies. We have apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Luke Corley-Harrison, and Councillor Pippa Connor is present as substitute for Councillor Corley-Harrison. So welcome, Councillor Connor. Councillor Connor, I beg your pardon. There are no items of urgent business. We're on to item 5, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No. So we are on to item 6, which is planning applications, and we move swiftly on to item 7, which is the Council Depot, Ashley Road, N17 9DP, pages 1 to 208.
Chair, before you get on to that, just a couple of points. I note I haven't seen minutes from the last meeting. I know what's happened to those. And in terms of declaration, it's just I'm a councillor for Tottenham Hill ward, which this Ashley Road Depot stands.
As regards the minutes of the meetings, Councillor Rice, we have had a lot of planning meetings recently, so we have to yet get the minutes written up, but we are saving them up, and I'm sure that we will be able to read through them all and remember everything that went on. So that's the first thing, and the and your declaration of interest that you are a Tottenham Hale ward councillor. Okay, thank you. So are you so? So as you've declared, made a declaration of interest, Councillor Rice, can you then clarify which item it relates to and whether or not you will be voting?
It relates to the first item we're going to speak on Ashley Road Depot, item 7 on the agenda, and I don't intend to vote on it.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay, so going on then to item 7, which is the Ashley Road Council Depot, pages 1 to 208. The proposal is a full planning application for the erection of 272 homes, including 50% socially rented homes extending 4 to 13 stories, 174 square metres of flexible use, Class E floor space, along with new vehicular access to the site, car parking and 2 pedestrian north-south routes. The proposal also includes both private and public hard and soft landscaping throughout the site. The recommendation is to grant, and I'll now pass over to the Planning Officer, Christopher Smith, who's going to introduce the application. Thank you.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. It's Fiona Ray, the Clerks Committee. Can I just check with Councillor Rice? Are you intending to sit on the committee for this item, just not to vote? I'm assuming it's not a pecuniary interest that you're declaring.
But I didn't say it had a peculiar interest. I said I wasn't going to vote on it. I can participate in the debate, can I, and not vote? Is that lawful?
Yeah, so just checking it's not a pecuniary interest. So you're just
No.
not voting for personal reasons.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, are you going to be taking part in the discussion?
Sorry, yes.
Sorry, are you going to be taking part in the discussion for the
Hopefully
item?
so, if the chair calls me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the proposed development at the former council depot site is for redevelopment of the vacant council depot itself. The erection of buildings are between 4 and 13 stories, 272 new homes, 136 of which are for council rent, which is 63% by habitable room. So that's 92 homes with 3 or more bedrooms, 34% of the total, 28 homes for wheelchair users, which is 10%, 86% dual or triple aspect homes, 42 car parking spaces, including 8 blue badge spaces, on-site play and communal amenity space, new public routes through the site, and significant public realm improvements. The site and its surroundings. Around the site, we have a Down Lane Park to the south, the House Academy School sports ground to the east, and a residential neighbourhood to the north and west. Just to describe the policy context as well, the site is within site allocation TH7 of the Tottenham Area Action Plan. It is in part a safeguarded waste site. It's within a growth area, within a housing zone, within the Upper Lee Valley Opportunity Area, a flood zone 2, and a Tier 3 archaeological priority area. There are no conservation areas or locally listed or listed buildings within close proximity of the site. So the site allocation, the application site is shown highlighted in red in the image you can see there, but the site allocation is slightly larger. Site allocation TH7, as mentioned previously. So the main objectives of the site allocation are to provide residential and education uses, to re-provide the waste capacity elsewhere if it's removed from the site, to provide a pedestrian and cycle extension of Ashley Road, an improved edge to the park, to protect trees on and around the site, and to connect to the district energy network in the area. So the site and its surroundings, starting in the top left-hand corner, that's the top of Ashley Road and the former depot sort of gated entrance, and then going around to the clockwise, the northern side of the park, Parkview Road North, Parkview Road West and Parkview Road North. So this site is part of the Tottenham Hale housing zone, and as such, it contributes to the zone-wide portfolio approach to new and affordable housing. If permission is granted, the proportion of affordable housing for all developments granted permission within the housing zone area would total 39% by habitable room, which would ensure that mixed and balanced communities would have been achieved within the housing zone area. In this aerial view of the development, you can see the development's layout in the form of 2 courtyard blocks and 1 podium block within a highly landscaped setting. All of the good quality existing trees would be retained and new soft landscaping would be provided throughout. All site boundaries around the site would be removed, That's around the existing site. And 2 north-south routes will be provided through the development, improving connectivity between Down Lane Park, the Lee Valley Regional Park and existing residential neighbourhoods. This indicative plan shows how building heights would gradually decrease from a 38-storey maximum in the middle of the emerging district centre to 12 and 11 storeys on the southern side of the park. The proposed development, which is mostly between 4 and 6 storeys in height, would form an appropriate step between the height of the tall buildings in the district centre and the residential neighbourhood to the north. The 6 to 7 storey building heights fronting the northern side of the park would work in tandem with the currently emerging buildings on the southern side to frame and define both sides of the park. The 10 and 13 storey buildings would improve wayfinding from the park and the wider local area towards extended Ashley Road and onto the Lee Valley Regional Park. This is a view from the northwest of the park, and it shows the relationship of the proposed buildings with the park. The boundary trees would be retained, and the 7-storey building on the left of the image there would include a commercial unit to provide natural surveillance to the park entrance. This is the view of the northeast of the park, which shows the tall buildings which mark the gateway to the extended Ashley Road. These tall buildings are located far away from existing residential properties and enable heights on the northern and western sides of the development to remain low, while also maximising the number of council rent properties on site. This is the view of the extended Ashley Road, basically the threshold between the new road and the existing road. And it shows the commercial unit activating this new route and highlights the high quality design detailing throughout the development and the use of decorative materials to highlight gateways to the park. There's a new publicly accessible route through the centre of the site, which improves access to the park for residents of the neighbourhood to the north. This route has a distinctly residential character, with front doors of maisonettes having direct access onto this shared communal space. The view from the west on Parkview Road shows the height of the new buildings on this side, which is predominantly 3 storeys plus an angled roof level. This is only a single storey in height greater than the existing homes on Parkview Road. This elevation also shows the retained trees and the new public realm planting and pathways around the site. The view from the north on Havelock Road shows a 5-storey corner building. This building highlights the road junction on this side of the site and is also fronted by retained tree planting and new public realm planting and pathways. These images show the public realm improvements in more detail, including the new open park edge treatment and the additional public realm and planting areas on Parkview Road. Sorry. I don't know what's happened there. Okay, sorry about that. 42 car parking spaces will be provided on the eastern side of the site. Some of these within a podium. The blue badge parking is indicated in pink and the service bays are indicated in green. Wheelchair user homes will be located on the eastern side of the development to ensure they are in close proximity to the blue badge parking spaces. So to summarise the key aspects of the development, it is a residential development provided in accordance with site allocation TH7. It provides flexible Class A uses which support the new and existing community. The education requirement of TH7 has been met through the Harris Academy, which is located partially, well, entirely within the site allocation TH7. The depot activities have been relocated to a new facility on Watermead Way, which recently opened. The recycling centre, which the waste designation covers, closed in 2018, and the waste throughput has been moved and consolidated to the existing council waste site in Wood Green. In terms of the site suitability for tall buildings, London Plan Policy D9 and Local Plan Policy DM6 requires tall buildings to be located in designated areas. The site is located outside of the Tottenham Hale tall building zone. The site has similar characteristics to that tall building zone, including good public transport access and close proximity to local amenities. It is within a growth area, a housing zone and an opportunity area. The site provides a gateway for pedestrians and cycles to access the Lee Valley. The tall buildings would improve local wayfinding, and therefore, despite conflict with policies D9 and DM6, the siting of tall buildings here would not result in any significant harm They are also of a high quality design, and there are no townscape or environmental impacts. In terms of the new housing, there are 272 new homes in total. 136 of these are for council rent, which is 50% by unit. 92 homes will be provided with 3 or more bedrooms, which is 34% of the total. And all of these 3 or 4 bedroom homes are for council rent. So in total, 63% of the homes would be provided for council rent by Habitable Room. So that's 28 homes for wheelchair users will be provided, 18 wheelchair user council rent homes, and the scheme overall is a tenure blind development. So there is a high residential quality. It meets the London Plan internal and amenity space standards. 86% of the units would be dual or triple aspect homes. The blocks would have secure and well lit access cores. There's lift access to all blocks. All of the wheelchair homes would be accessible by 2 lifts. All of the wheelchair homes would be located close to the blue badge parking spaces. All buildings are fitted with sprinklers. There is communal and play space, communal amenity and play space available on site, and other public open spaces available nearby as well. So the quality review panel has stated that it is broadly supportive of the current proposals, which have the potential to become an exemplar for future development in the borough. And since that review, the design has evolved further following and responding to the panel's comments. There is strong support for this development from the council's design officer. In terms of residential amenity, there is no significant impact on the amenity of nearby residents. And in terms of carbon reduction, there is a reduction of 84% against the 2013 building regulations, and more than 80% of the homes are eligible for Passive House accreditation. The scheme would also connect to the district energy network in the local area once it is available. In terms of transport and parking, there are 42 car parking spaces, which is a ratio of 0.15. There are 8 blue badge parking spaces. The scheme would be car capped, so new residents would not be able to apply for parking permits in the local area, apart from for the users of the 42 car parking spaces. There'll be high quality cycle parking provided throughout the development, and improvements to the public highway provided as well. In terms of the public realm and landscaping, there are new public paths and soft landscaping provided around the site and throughout it as well. There's a contribution provided to improve the underpass to the north of the site, which will improve access to the Lee Valley. The good quality trees around the site will be retained, and 74 new trees will be planted, and there is a significant net gain in biodiversity across the site. In terms of planning obligations, there are a range of obligations secured, including the 136 homes for council rent, a carbon offsetting contribution, a play space contribution, improvements to the public realm on the eastern and western sides of Down Lane Park, improvements to the underpass connecting the Parkview Road and Lee Valley Regional Park, as I just mentioned, employment and skills initiatives as well, and other contributions as required by this application, totaling over £750,000. So the recommendation is that officers recommend the committee resolves to grant planning permission subject to the conditions and planning obligations as set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to questions, Councillor Rice, we're not very clear on the situation. You've declared an interest, but you've said that you want to speak. So will you be speaking as a ward councillor or a committee member? Sorry?
I understand something different, Madam Chair. I want to speak on this item. If you want me to withdraw from the committee and speak as a councillor, I'll do that.
So just to clarify, are you speaking in your role as ward councillor to represent local constituents, or are you speaking as sort of just a councillor?
I didn't hear all of that. But I personally live about 150 yards from this site. So I've got an interest in that regard, like any other person who lives nearby. And there are whole matters of things, fact that appears in this
If I might just, so are you representing local like residents in your ward or just speaking as a councillor?
Well, when I speak on council matters, I'm always representing my ward, whatever it may be.
So the question is, are you representing specific local residents who've come to you in respect of this case?
No, I'm not representing specific local residents, no.
I think the other question would be whether you have an open mind or not, because as a committee member, you have a responsibility to come with an open mind. So if you've predetermined your decision on this item, then you can't participate as a committee member, but you could participate as a ward councillor, which would mean you leave the committee area and you're given the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes on behalf of your ward.
If you want me to withdraw from the committee, I'll do that and speak as a ward councillor. I think that's probably more clinical.
Well, yeah, I think the choice is obviously yours, but that sounds like it's most appropriate that you have a view as a ward councillor that you want to share. So you have a view as ward councillor that you want to share. You're not coming to this with an open mind, seeking to make your decision once you've heard all the issues.
I don't know what's going on here. I already said I'm not going to vote. The question of hearing all views that I'm coming to consider, that doesn't apply if you're not going to vote. So, right. But see that the top table seems to be in a bit of a fuss about it. I think the safest way to proceed would be for me to withdraw and to be allowed to speak as an ordinary resident member of the public, council, whatever you want, title you want to give me, but allowed to speak on the paper.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Rice. You will have to go and sit in the public gallery. Thank you. Well, you know, the nice chairs over by the window. I mean, we can, can we get Councillor Rice a nice chair, please? Come on, we've got a lot to get through. Thank you. There's a nice chair there for you, Councillor Rice. Thank you.
Just need to build that.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So we're back on track. So, members of the committee, do you have any clarification questions of the planning officer? And I've got, sorry, Councillor Say first.
I've got a few sort of minor things to ask about. On page 38, the archaeological surveys, what happens if they come up with something? That's the first question. On page 39, there's it's standard 12 of the SPG says you have 8 homes or less per core, but we've got 9 here. So can you explain the significance of why you've got to have 8 homes or less, and why is it okay to exceed this? Page 42, play space for the under 5s. you give precise measurements, which indicates that it's 46 square metres under the requirement. Then the next paragraph says play on the move features with no quantity attached. And then you say that it's you say the play space target is exceeded. How can you explain how you know that? And with the parking, visitors can park in surrounding streets, presumably with visitors permits, and yet the residents themselves are not allowed to. And I don't think that makes sense. Okay, that's.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the first one of those. Just to give an example, on some of the recent sites in Tottenham Hill, they have found archaeological remains. They dig them up, they display them. We've had an open day with local school children, things like that. They're then recorded, and the most valuable ones are archived quite often in Bruce Castle Museum. On Hill Wharf, for example, they found an old mill under the ground. So again, it was photographed and recorded, but ultimately it didn't stop the development. It was still able to go ahead. So it's not something that will thwart this. It just requires a process to be followed to make sure that that information is recorded. I think next was the long corridors, which I'll just put over to the design officer.
Yes, it should probably say 8 units per floor per core. So it's the guidance is that there shouldn't be more than 8 units on any one floor accessed off one core. It's absolutely fine to have more than 8 units off a single core if they're on separate on different floors. So there's far less than 8 units on any one floor off any one core in this development. I can't remember how many it is. I think the maximum is 5 units off any one core on any floor.
Yes, on the play space, I think in terms of the quantums explained within the sort of information pack we had with the application, there was a slight under provision against the 0 to 5's play space, but we knew there was also sort of what they term play on the way space, so informal play space around the site, that the quantum of that would take the figure above what was needed in terms of the 0 and 5 play space, although there wasn't an exact figure for that. I think in time we have a condition on the application, which means we will get those quantums clarified before the commencement on the development starts. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just ask Maurice from the transportation team to clarify the position on the approach taken to parking permits.
Sure. Good evening, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. So the standard position on car cap and car free developments are that residents are not allowed to apply for on-street parking permits, and that's to do with the quantum and increasing the on-street car parking pressure. However, in terms of visitors, you're likely to get less visitors compared to the number of residents, so it'll have less of an impact in terms of the parking pressure that it will generate on street. So it's the policy and Haringey policy that in all car capped and car free developments, residents are not allowed to apply for on-street parking permit, and that's to do with the parking pressures, and also in line with our policies, which is policy DM32 in terms of trying to promote more sustainable development. But residents who have visitors, because visitors are an essential part in providing support for some residents, are allowed to apply for on-street visitors permit, and that's a standard policy.
And so, Councillor Over.
It's more of a comment. Under the GLA summary comments on page 9 and under the local representation comments, page 10, there were concerns raised regarding the increase in traffic and vehicular dominance. And I understand that there's going to be a travel plan monitoring, traffic monitoring plan. I just want to make sure that that's going to be robust. So there'll be a robust monitoring of traffic in the area to ensure that there are measures in place if there are any issues that arise following the development.
Chair, I think that's another one for Maurice to take.
Sure. I'm happy to take that one, Chair. I mean, as I mentioned before, Chair, this is pretty much a car cap development, and it's got a limited amount of parking. There's 42 car parking space, work out to 0.15 car parking space per unit, including wheelchair accessible car parking space. Most of the times, these car parking space will have cars that are not being used. So when you compare the use in terms of this development as a residential development with a car parking space compared to the existing or previous depot use, it'll generate far less trips, and it will be cleaner trips in terms of the vehicles that are using them. But we will definitely monitor this development as part of the travel plan. I think that will be secured by the appropriate legal agreement, and that will be monitored for over 5 years to make sure we have all the necessary support for sustainable modes of transport. So we'll take that on board, and we'll make sure it's monitored.
Councillor Bevan.
Okay, I won't make my comments about the design yet. I just asked a few questions. The managing of the private properties that are going to be sold, will that remain with the council? And I'm assuming that we will not be selling any freehold properties, they will be leasehold, so we will maintain the freehold. And I'm not quite sure if the government ground rent changes affect that in any way, so perhaps you can just clarify that. And the parking, how will the parking spaces be allocated? Will they all be for the social housing, or will they all be for the private sale? Because that way they'll obviously sell, but be sold easier. And then on page 58, you talk about lift shafts and lobbies on page 58. If I can just read it out, because it's quite substantial. It says buildings over 18 metres in height would be provided firefighting shafts, lobbies and lifts. Can you just clarify what that means? Is it 2 lifts in those blocks, or exactly what does that mean?
Chair, if I could just suggest that we hold those questions until it's for the applicants point to provide answers. We just have to hear from Councillor Rice first before we come to that on the running order. So I've taken a note of that. The management of spaces and freeholds, parking management and fire safety. We'll put those to the applicant shortly.
Councillor White.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the GLA's contribution, where the GLA's saying that they would not support the loss of a waste site. Now, obviously, that seems to have been answered in our packs. That's page. Page 17, paragraph 6.43 onwards, that seems to answer that point. But given that as far as I can see, the mayor has the possibility of overturning, were we minded to agree this development tonight, the mayor can overturn it on those grounds. Are we confident that the GLA's original objections to the proposal have been answered, and that we're not in danger of any approval being overturned?
Yes, Mia, thanks for pointing that out. There have been discussions ongoing with the GLA's waste team and the case officer at the GLA, and we have a sort of in principle agreement that the arguments we're making in this report are accepted by the GLA. There will be some further discussions subject to the decision of this committee before the GLA give us their stage 2 comments, which would potentially allow us to decide the application. So yes, I'm confident, given those discussions, that the waste matter has been dealt with in accordance with the report.
Councillor Bartlett, I've got you down, Councillor Worrell. I'll bring you in a moment.
Thanks. I wonder if you could just clarify a bit more about how it works in the case that the council's the landowner and also the planning authority, because it mentions the conditions that have been set out in writing that would normally be through section 106. I just wondered how that relationship gets managed kind of going forward for the next stages?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. What we put in place is an exchange of letters between the relevant assistant directors. So they make a commitment to honour those conditions and the obligations that would normally go into 106. And there's within that exchange of letters, there's a sort of role for the chief exec to arbitrate between that. So if it ever came to a dispute about the enforcement of those, then it's clear how that's managed.
Councillor Dunstall.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the numbers bit, so we've got 136 affordable homes deliverable for council rent. 92 or 67% are to have 3 or more bedrooms. Two parts to this. First one is how many more bedrooms, and do we know what that split is? And also, how does that 67% reflect the need in terms of the people we have in TA or on the housing register in Band A and yeah.
In terms of meeting the needs of residents, that's a better question for the applicant team if they could potentially respond to that with that sort of level of detail. From a planning perspective, it's really about mixed and balanced communities. So the policy is about avoiding an over provision of 1 and 2 bed units. It doesn't specify a number for family size units, but it's always our ambition to maximise that as much as possible because it is an identified need in our housing assessments. So in terms of addressing the waiting list, that's really for the applicant to come back on that.
Question. And the breakdown of the numbers, there's a table on page 24, which has a breakdown on 1, 2, 3, 4 beds and total homes. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the quantums.
Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. So yeah, it says that I think it was 84% of the homes will meet Passive House accreditation, which is great. I was just wondering what were the sort of barriers to having all of the new homes meeting Passive House?
Well, with Passive House is a very high benchmark in terms of the amount of sort of fabric efficiency and the layout of the blocks need to be arranged in a certain way to be able to achieve the Passive House standard. So I think the applicant has worked very hard from an early stage to lay the blocks out to maximise that quantum, but it unfortunately hasn't been possible for every single home. Yeah, I don't know if Sustainability Officer wants to add a bit more to that, or.
I think we could probably hear from the applicant on that, just in terms of the design process as well, would probably help.
Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point a clarification around the comments around the mixed tenure of the development, which sounds brilliant. But at 6.95, it says market homes, so the bonds for sale, would generally be located within blocks accessed by a single core for ease of management. So these blocks will be located in the southwest and northeast of the site. So does that actually mean that the private homes for sale will be in their own blocks and the social housing houses will be in the other development parts of the development? Thanks.
Yes, that's right. The social homes will be within their own dedicated blocks, and the same with the market homes. I believe there are management reasons for that, and it helps to keep the service charges low. And that's the reason for that.
I think just in terms of the other side of that is that this is tenure blind. Everything's the same exterior finish, so you won't be able to look at them and know. They all have access to the same areas, so there are those management issues that mean the cores have to be separated, but in terms of the experience of residents, they all get the same access to amenities, and the blocks look as good as one another.
Councillor Dunstall?
That was my question, actually, those open spaces are maintained for everybody, then there's no private areas that are separated off, so you've answered that.
That's correct, yeah.
Are there any more questions from the committee? Councillor Worrell.
Sorry, I was just interested about the management reasons that you described, because I'm not really familiar with what that would mean. It might be a question for the applicant or yourselves, I'm not sure. But yeah, just interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think it's probably one that the applicant can talk about in detail, but it is just really service charges and issues like quality of finish. Quite often, council housing wants to we invest for longer and want things to last longer, so we have a different finish, and just the service charges can be different within those blocks and ask for different things. So altogether, that prohibits mixed tenure blocks in most cases.
Any more questions? Oh, okay. So Councillor Rice, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for those precious 3 minutes. My contribution should really be raising concerns about this development rather than yeah and nay for it. My first contribution will be just to say that I think we missed the chance in this development. Where we live in that corner of North Tottenham, there have only been one development of parkland in the last 50 years. I think a place called Hartington Park. It's quite a small development. It was development when the old GAC was alive. And this development is quite a substantial piece of land. We sold a bit off already to Harris School, and now we're left with this. And I think that we should have tread carefully and consider it more fully in terms of would it be possible to develop a park here in North London. If you look at what's around Tottenham Hill now in this Donglane Park, it's terribly crowded with dwellings. We all welcome new housing, but where are the recreational facilities for the people who live in these houses around Donglane Park? And here was a wonderful opportunity to grasp the nettle and develop a park. I tell you, we're not going to see it again. That opportunity will not come again in all lifetimes, right? But when you get a bit of land which you could flatten and do things with it, and you get a nice park, right? The second thing I'm concerned about, there's supposed to be some working group with Ruth Gordon, my fellow councillor for Tottenham Hill, was handed up. There's no consultation report on any of these papers. There's not a single word here which says the public being consulted on this, and here's the results. Not a word. And if you look at the picture, and was it possible to bring that photograph up? But it was Halflock Road and Parkview Road. Is it possible to do that?
Yes, I'll do it now. 1 minute.
It's taking me time. Now, have you seen it? The reason why I'm asking for that to bother, if you look at it, there's a high-rise building about 5 stories next to there's 2-story building, but nobody's ever been consulted in North Tottenham about that. I live very close to this site. I would have been in normal consultation, would be asked what I think about it. Nobody's asked me. I think about it, and I'm not sure what happened. Ruth would probably get an opportunity to say what happened to her group before this was submitted to the committee to make decisions. So, just imagine you suddenly finding out you live in that two-story building next to that 5-story building. You suddenly find out this is my next door neighbor, and no one has told me anything. So what's happened to it, fellas? And I just one little thing I found looking at the papers, the quality review panel at page 27, and it says the panel would support greater clarity on the hierarchy of entrances and accesses to the buildings and courtyards spaces to ensure that natural desire lines are defined and reinforced. What's this gobbledygook? What's this about? Do ordinary people understand that?
Okay, that's your time up, councillor Rice. Thank
So I
you.
can't, am I going to get an answer to the things that I raised?
Just again.
Yes or no?
I think in the running order, we're not obliged to answer that, but we certainly can. Chris or Richard, do you just want to come back on that point? The clarity of the hierarchy of entrances.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a clarity in hierarchy of entrance. All the blocks and ground and first floor maisonettes are entered off the street, either the new streets or the existing street. Is that what you mean? Or
I simply want to know what it means, and why could you not put it in more simpler language people can understand it without having to ask you what it means?
what does hierarchy of entrances mean? I mean, I suppose are the entrances to houses more? Are the entrances to flatted blocks? Have they got a greater presence, a greater spaciousness, and so on to the ordinary residential entrances to the? So there are several blocks which have ground and first floor maisonettes, which each have their own front door directly off the street. But those are just a single front door, you know, with a narrow side light, accessed off a short front garden. Whereas there are then several blocks which are flatted blocks or lead to the upper floor maisonettes, where there's a shared entrance where you enter several flats off the same entrance off the street. So the doors to those blocks are grander. They're larger entrances. They lead to a large entrance foyer and lifts and stairs leading up to the upper floors. So that's what hierarchy of entrances means. And generally, the fact that those flatted blocks are on the corners with entrances at the corners of the streets, whereas the ground and first floor maisonettes are in the middle of the street, you know, between the corners. So that gives the flatted blocks a greater hierarchy in the street network.
Thank you very much. So,
I had my answer.
sorry,
Consultation.
no, sorry, councillor Rice.
What about the consultation results? That's all? Have there been consultation? If so, what's the results?
Thank you, Chair. Page 10 sets out the local representations. It says nearly 200 individual letters were sent out, and the numbers there broken down on objecting, commenting and supporting. So they're listed on page 10. That's the planning application consultation. We also require developers to do pre-application consultation. The applicant might want to talk about that later, but they have carried out pre-application consultation as well. But we must assess the planning application consultation, which is summarised on page 10.
Thank you. So, councillor Rice, you have to leave the room now because you can't be here for the deliberations. So, so as we have no objectors, we'll move straight to questions on councillor Rice. Right. Thank you. So the applicant team can speak for 3.5 minutes. Is that, yeah.
Okay, Chair, sorry, it's Mark Stallard here. I'm the lead officer in the housing team for this, and I'm just going to pick up the point about consultation, if that's okay, and then the rest of the team.
Speak over here.
Sorry?
Mark, can you wait for a second?
Sorry, sorry, can I just get control again? So could you? So if the applicant team, can you introduce yourselves, please? And you've decided that you two are going to speak on behalf of the applicant. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm the Cabinet Member responsible for house building, placemaking and development. I was going to respond to the questions that Councillor Rice put on the consultation and the consultation group, and then I'll hand over to the architect here to speak to some of the other points. So just first of all to say that I live very close to this site, literally within spitting distance, and I've been very closely involved with the analysis of the in my role as cabinet member, the analysis of the comments that have come in from the consultations, which is 2 full consultations that we've done, which have been both online and in person and extremely well attended by lots of different stakeholders in the ward area. I have set up a community design group for Down Lane Park, which is specifically to redesign the park because we've got some S106 contributions for that park. However, the remit for that design group, they have a terms of reference and they would not be allowed to comment on a neighbouring development, just as they wouldn't be allowed to comment on the Wellbourne site development or the Ashley Road developments. It is strictly outside of the remit of that particular group. However, I do know from personal experience that many individuals who are also, local stakeholders, so part of that group is the Harris Academy, and part of that group is Healthy Streets North Tottenham, Living Under One Sun, the Park Users Forum. They have all been very interested in this scheme and have gone along to the consultations, and mostly they've got a very positive reaction to the scheme because precisely it enables the park to sort of bleed out into the north area where we've had particular issues of antisocial behaviour both on there and on Parkview Road North as well. I'll hand over to my colleague.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Jo McCafferty, Director at Levin Bernstein Architects and Landscape Architects. I'll try to address the issues raised very quickly. The development itself also has an incredibly strong landscape focus. So as Councillor was describing, it's drawing in the park into its design. It creates 3,969 square metres, which is 25% of the site, of green space in 2 courtyards and a residential podium, as well as play on the way, as the planning officers described, and lots of play. It also resolves some of the really difficult issues on the edge of Down Lane Park whilst retaining the existing trees along that edge. And handles that with lots of overlooking and front doors along that edge, which is a key crucial aspect to improving Down Lane Park and its use at all times of the day. 74 new trees are being provided across the site, especially those maximising value to native wildlife, and we're integrating a site-wide planting strategy and also a SAD strategy with the retention of the site's most mature existing trees. The urban greening factor of the site exceeds the GLA requirements at 0.45, which is really extraordinary for an urban site. And the biodiversity net gain is an extraordinary 119%. And the requirement for that is 10%. So you can see through those figures that really we are maximising the green whilst providing a really high level of affordable housing.
Thank you. So it's questions now to the applicant team. And if you can introduce yourselves, and we've got the questions. We've got the questions that still need to be picked up from Councillor Bevan and Councillor Dunstan.
Robbie Urban, I'm the Assistant Director for Housing at the Council. Martin Cowie, Planning Advisor to the Housing Delivery Team.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions for the applicant team? So Councillor Connor.
Thought there'd be a big rush. Thank you, Chair. So I've got a couple of questions that I just wanted to ask. Sorry, my thing keeps timing out. I was a little bit concerned actually about hearing about the play space for the children. One is because the amount of space that was the recommended amount is actually half of that. And what's been said in the report is that they can go to Downhill Lane Park for that green space. So the question I have is that every applicant that comes to us, irrespective of who it is, for building in that area, all mentions Down Lane Park as a place of recreation. Now, I understand you're putting in money to do, extra, play things within it. However, I'm concerned that actually the remit given to you, under planning was just over 2,000. Was it 2,080 square metres? And actually we're providing 900 square metres, or just over 900. So I've got the numbers here. So that was my first question. And the second question is around the access to Lee Valley. Every time we go and have a look at that area, it's so close to Lee Valley, and that underpass is dreadful. Now, I know you're saying you're going to put money in to do this, but isn't this an opportunity? I mean, Councillor Rice mentioned increasing the park. Now, I understand the pressures you have on housing, so wouldn't a really good idea be to not just do the underpass, but maybe a really wide sort of bridge over that railway and actually into Lee Valley, because that's when people could genuinely access it. I don't know what things you're going to do about the underpass, because you haven't mentioned it in the report, other than that you're going to spend some money on it. But it is pretty dire, and I wouldn't want to be sending an 11-year-old in that underpass to go to Lee Valley. So I'd want some sort of further clarity from yourselves as actually the thoughts about accessing such an enormously fantastic space that we've got right on that doorstep, but most people can't access. So those are my two questions. Thank you, Chair.
Should we, okay, I'll respond on the play space. And we also have Darling in our landscape architect, so she may want to add to this. But essentially, in terms of provision, our 0 to 11 play space does meet the standards. What we are over providing on it is additional play on the way, which is space. So for example, in the residential lane, which is a car-free route, which is the north-south cycle and pedestrian only route into the park, the intention is, and the design shows, there's lots of play opportunities in that space, but it's not quantified as the planning officer was explaining. But that will be absolutely conditioned in terms of what the officer described, in terms of how we quantify that space, that play on the way space. So that's one area where that absolutely occurs on the plan and has been designed, and we can easily give the figures for those things, but it shows a vast over provision in terms of play. That's the 0 to 11 age. In terms of the over 11, which is the point you're making, yes, there is under provision, but hence the contribution. I'm not sure whether our client on screen or anybody else from the team wants to talk about how that money will be spent, sort of slightly outside my remit as architect.
I think it's worth saying that money will be spent in the co-produced scheme that's being looked at the park. So it'll be very much designed in tandem with local residents. How that money will be spent. Should we pick up on the second point? Is that so? In terms of access to Lee Valley, obviously, there are very significant contributions that this site is making in terms of very substantial cash contributions. It's contributing very, very large amounts of affordable housing and family-sized units as well. I think, yes, there are things that we always want to do to improve the area, but I think, you know, it's very, very difficult to put that all on one scheme. I think, you know, there are very, very significant contributions this scheme is being made, and I do understand the point about improving the access to the Lee Valley, but I think that's something that we may need to look at outside of this scheme rather than it being something that just one housing development can support.
Can we pick up on the questions that Councillor Bevan asked, which was about the private properties to be sold? Are they going to be freehold and leasehold? You did talk about the allocation of parking, John. I can't, Councillor Bevan, I can't quite remember what that was. And you were asking how many lifts were in the blocks.
Can I do the first two, and then I'll let Joe do the last one.
Okay.
So the private homes will be leasehold, and the parking spaces will all go to the 3 and 4 bedroom homes, all of which are for social rent.
Wheelchair.
And the wheelchair homes as well. Which, yes, and the wheelchair homes as well.
Thanks, Robbie. I just want to clarify the fire issues then. So all buildings, just for clarity, all buildings over 18 metres and buildings with accessible homes within them will all have 2 lifts. So there are 6 buildings in that situation. And buildings under 18 metres, as per the regulations, will have 1 lift, and there are 4 buildings in that situation. All buildings have evacuation lifts in line with emerging guidance, and that's written in that as part of the planning application. It's clearly specified in terms of the overall fire strategy for the development.
Councillor Dunstall, I think there was a question which was, I've got breakdown of numbers. Was that answered previously, or do you have a question for the applicant team on that?
Was it with reference to how it reflected the actual need across kind of the housing waiting list and TA and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, it's worth saying we do have very significant need across all types of housing. In Band A, about 27% of the need is for 3 or 4 bedroom homes. That gets substantially greater once we get to Band B, where we're looking, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's around 45 to 50% are in need of 3 to 4 bedroom homes. So we do have a very, very significant need there, which is why our current target for our delivery programme is to get to 45% 3 and 4 bedrooms council homes overall. We're a little bit behind on that on a lot of our schemes, so this feels like a really good opportunity to provide some really good quality family homes for our residents who we know badly need them.
Councillor Buxton.
Thanks. I'm not going to mention the car parking, but I am interested in the cycle parking spaces. I think it's more relevant for the applicant. So there's 512 high quality cycle parking spaces. I just kind of want to know, do we have any indication about what's the justification for that number? Do we have any idea of council tenants' ownership of bikes, for example? And also, are there any council schemes to increase bike ownership?
I just start on the design matters. So you're absolutely right. It's in terms of the secure cycle parking that we're providing, and that's set out by the London Plan and the GLA standards, and it exceeds that. They're distributed in a variety of different ways across the development, but what we try to do is build them into the body of the buildings so that they're not that they're secure and that they're safe, and also that they're not over there aren't too many cycle stores in one space. So we've tried to distribute them. Some are in the podium, some of them are aside cores, and they're all readily accessible. So they're in easy proximity of where you're leaving your home or coming into your home. In terms of the numbers of social, it's over policy compliant, but it just in terms of our experience of what residents, their ownership levels, I haven't got any statistics on that. I don't know if anyone else wants to answer that, but it's built on our experience as architects. We work on a lot of housing regeneration projects.
Yeah, through you, Chair, if you don't mind, Councillor, I mean, cycling is incredibly important now as part of a housing delivery programme, and it's not just about homes, it's about sort of sustainable development. So we haven't got as much intel as we would like about how, you know, existing council tenants, travel, but we are seeking to sort of obviously monitor that with these new council schemes. And in fact, on where we are delivering sort of new infill developments on existing estates, we're also offering new bike facilities for existing estates to just try to sort of test the waters to see if sort of existing residents are willing to use them. And we're obviously working closely with your asset management colleagues, yeah, former Homes Houndgate, of course, yeah. So it's something we want to really sort of promote, of course, yeah.
Can I bring Rob Shizowski in, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. And Councillor, you had a question on, are there any wider council schemes about sort of supporting bike ownership and things like that? So not directly relevant to this application, but yes, the council has a try before you bike scheme. We also have a comprehensive walking and cycling action plan to encourage walking and cycling across the borough. So there's a whole stream of active travel activities and an active travel team precisely for those things, although not directly related to this particular application in front of us today. Thanks.
So are there any other? Councillor Bevan.
Couple of design issues here. So on page 5 at the bottom, it refers to precast concrete and light ceramic materials. That seems to me precast concrete is going to be there forever. It's going to get stained, it's going to get dirty. It's not going to be decorated or painted, or it can't be wiped over. I'm just a bit concerned with having precast concrete exposed forever, because I think it will deteriorate and spoil the overall look in time. As the same with the light coloured ceramics. I mean, if it's going to be cream type whitish ceramics, I'm not particularly keen on that. I think that will deteriorate over time. And then if we can just go to the picture of the view from Havelock Road, if you can just bring that picture up. Yeah, that one. I mean, I don't see any design merit in that block at all. To me, that absolutely looks appalling. I don't know if it's got houses opposite or if it's in a really prominent location, but to me, that's a design that is so dated and looks so awful. I really can't understand how that got past anybody. So, and then one minor point, the balconies everywhere. I know people sitting on balconies like some privacy. So depending what screening you use, and also the screening hides junk as well as giving privacy. But that picture, I mean, I don't know how that got past any design people at all. It looks absolutely appalling. Can we not do something with it?
If I can come back on each of those points. So just first of all, taking the material palette point, in terms of our use of precast concrete, it's actually in relatively minimal areas. We haven't got big panels of precast concrete. It's essentially highlighting lintels or banding within the elevations. The majority of the elevations are 100% brick, and we've looked very carefully at the brick specification and the colour palette, and it matches very closely with the adjacent context. What we are using are a series of glaze bricks, which are called ceramic tiles, I think, in the planning report, but in fact are glaze bricks. And the intention is, as is shown by the CGIs, is that actually they're a kind of green colour. and that's been looked very carefully alongside the brick palette that we've been selecting. They are, again, in relatively minimal areas. A4, building A4 is one key building which sits on the corner of the park and has a very unique position to hold in that northwest corner of Down Lane Park. And so that has a plinth of glazed bricks, which obviously can be wiped and are incredibly robust. A lot of Victorian pubs used glazed bricks in their kind of plinth buildings for that very reason. So it's very much to mark kind of key moments and key corners. We also are using very small amounts of glazed bricks to identify key openings. So very, very slender areas in kind of window reveals and door reveals and so on to make those moments special within the design. With regard to balcony design, if I'd like to just come to that for one moment, we've looked really carefully at the screening of balconies for the very reason, Councillor, you're talking about, and we've looked very carefully at the balustrade design itself. And what we are doing is we're angling the balusters in that balcony design so that actually you look at them from one direction and they almost appear solid. So we've looked very carefully at the overall impression that the balconies give. Obviously, we don't want them to be very, very heavy components in the architecture either. So it's getting the screening for the residents and privacy for the residents, but also a degree of permeability. And we think that we've really worked on that incredibly hard to get that design working. With regard to Havelock Road and the design of that, I think I would say that the visualization on screen doesn't do that building justice in the fact that it's quite a dark visualization where it's appearing there, and actually in the design access statement it's a much lighter image. But we've worked very hard in terms of designing these buildings so that they work really well together as an overall development. We've gone through very rigorous DRP process twice. We've also had significant engagement with the planning team, probably every month through the whole application, or pretty much near that, and evolved the design, and particularly these kind of key knuckle buildings, we're calling them, in line with their advice and guidance. And I'll allow Richard to speak for himself, but we've had strong support for the aesthetic of the overall development, both from the QRP and also the planning team.
Sorry, through you, Chair, do you mind? Can I just, a couple of points as well. One was on Passive House, which I think, Joe, if you got, and another one, I just quickly just explain further to what Rob was saying about our pre-application engagement exercises. We undertook two significant sort of community engagement exercises before submitting last year, and we sent out 5,000 brochures locally. We undertook a variety of events to try to sort of obviously attract interest, and we did sort of attract quite a degree of sort of interest, which we subsequently acted on, changed the scheme, brought the heights down, ultimately the density, and as you can see from the papers before you, the application has resulted in a couple of dozen representations being made now by local residents. Some of those are letters of support. So I think for a scheme of this scale, I think we've sort of feel that we've handled sort of the community engagement sort of a process reasonably well. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that there's a lot of background work done with the community before you saw the planning application.
Thanks, Martin. Should I just talk about Passive House? I think, Councillor Aurora, that was something that you quite rightfully raised. Yes, 80% of all homes achieve full certification. The reason we don't have 100% is essentially for a number of reasons which the planning officer has set out, but essentially some of the buildings are smaller because they should be in their context, and they're facing two-storey residential buildings on Parkview Road North, particularly in Parkview Road West. When you have smaller buildings, and particularly buildings that don't have flat roofs, so we have a series of buildings where the top storey is tucked in these pitched roofs, and we're doing that for contextual reasons so that it sits well in its setting and landscape. adjacent buildings. It means that what you call the form factor of those buildings is more complex, and so therefore achieving full passive house for buildings like that is near impossible, actually. But it does mean where we can achieve full passive house, we really have. When we've simplified the buildings, so the taller buildings that stack, it's much more easy to achieve full passive house. So hence why across the overall scheme we're achieving 80%, which is an incredible achievement for a scheme of this size, I think.
Councillor Buxton.
Just coming back on what was just said about the consultation and the height of the buildings, I just kind of want a clarification with, you said the height of the buildings were reduced with consultation. So, I mean, you could plan a 100-floor building and say we've reduced it to 6 floors. So can we just get a clarification of, you know, how the final height was decided with consultation?
Yeah, let me just kick off. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we're a council developer, okay? So we don't sort of tend to sort of, yes, take that approach that you've kind of alluded to. But we obviously, as a council developer, our agenda being to optimise, you know, affordable council homes. We clearly want to sort of test what the optimum sort of level might be. So we genuinely sort of put out an initial scheme, you know, following sort of pre-application engagement with your planning officers to just ascertain whether this might be something the community might sort of buy into. But we knew that there might have been sensitivities in the local area. But we felt as a development team, it was still workable because our ultimate aim, you know, was to sort of deliver council homes and use public monies effectively. So following the first round of consultation, we understood that sort of the community were a little concerned about the height of the blocks on the perimeter against Parkview Road. And so we effectively brought down those buildings by a storey, hence why they're sort of, you know, 3.5. So they're more compatible both in terms of scale and appearance with the pitched roof to those sort of traditional terraces. And that was a key move that I think sort of consequently led to the sort of community being sort of rather more satisfied and not sort of objecting at that point. There are other sort of changes that we made, and Jo can just highlight those briefly, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Martin. The other big shift was actually overlooking the park. So we had 7-storey buildings overlooking the park, a kind of continual 7 stories, and we took that down to 6 stories, and that was through the engagement process. We had lots of conversations about height, and also originally we had a very kind of architecturally expressive roof. We had a kind of sawtooth roof, and through engagement and discussion both with the planning team, the QRP, but also most importantly local residents, we simplified the roof line so that it sits alongside the trees rather than kind of dramatically poking above them. So those were the key, I think those were the key kind of massing changes.
But the consequence, we lost quite a few units, affordable units. But that's something sort of we were prepared to accept because, of course, we want to ensure that this has the full support of the local community.
Can I bring Rob? She's off.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. And just to address Councillor Bevan's point about has this gone through design review and expertise and so on. So absolutely it has. It's been to Quality Review Panel, which is an independent panel of architects and designers and experts on this, and their findings from their exercise are presented from page 26 onwards. They talk about the scheme becoming an exemplar for future development in the borough. They support the approach to massing and specifically building heights. And they even talk about it being revised from the previous time it was presented to them. So the first time around, it has been reduced in heights. They talk about welcoming the reduction of building B1 from 5 to 4 stories. So this definitely has gone through the design process. And we also have our own expert design officer, Richard Truscott, who would just like to come in just to address some of the points. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a really exemplary, high quality design. Generally, I think it's a potential future award winner, and I think it's a really great quality generally. I know there've been quite a lot of questions. I think particularly, I think it's worth addressing the questions about the the corner building on that key crossroads at the northwest corner of the development site. In other words, the junction of Parkview Road, Havelock Road, and Dowsett Road, the fourth road that people are forgetting. I think we felt it was appropriate and necessary to have a bit of a knuckle building that holds the corner and establishes a more substantial corner. You know, sitting in the situation where currently you just get the two gable ends, mostly blank gable ends of the houses which face Havelock Road going north. You've got the terrace running along the bit of Parkview Road that runs along the north side of the site, runs east, starts well away from the corner, and the terrace running on the west side of Parkview Road, where it runs along the west side of the site, running south, that also starts well away from the corner. And there's a sort of single-story building taking up a quite substantial bit of the corner because it's a sort of angular corner. So that 5-story building, the knuckle which holds the crossroads, it won't be directly in relationship to any 2-story existing houses. The 2-story existing houses are only directly opposite the 3-story stacked maisonettes along the north and west side. Instead, it's on that sort of very open, very nebulous corner at present. And also, along with the maisonettes running along the Parkview Road and north and west sides, it's set back from the street with quite a substantial green strip, a sort of park strip, with those existing mature trees retained, and where there are gaps, such as at this corner, in fact, new trees which can grow up to be similarly large trees in the gaps, where the existing boundary wall of the existing depot will be retained as a very low wall, and there'll be quite a big wide swathe of soft landscaping, which does sustainable urban drainage functions and contains herbaceous plants and things like that. So it'll be quite a lush landscape strip with a pavement landscape strip with the wall in, and then a second pavement with the paths leading to the front doors, including to the corner knuckle building. So I think it fits in a different way, and that image doesn't show the trees and the landscape strip very well. The trees tend to disappear against the dark brickwork of the building in the render. I think in reality, the trees will, even in winter, the trees with their branches will sit in front of that and be more visible than the building. The building will sit behind that. And yes, the balconies do look clear when you're looking down the length of Havelock Road, because that's the intention. The balconies with their angled fins have a long view, but the close view, when you're close to the house, to the block, you look up directly at the building, and you'd be disturbing the privacy of the people on their balconies and seeing all their clutter and things. That's when the angled fins prevent the direct view of the balcony.
Right, I've got Councillor Connor, and then I think I'd like to bring this to a close.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions then. One on the wheelchair access to the flats and other. I'm not sure if there's anything larger than the 3-bedroomed, but just to clarify, it's not just wheelchair accessible, is it? You are actually doing the whole gamut with the joists are all going to be strengthened so that they can take specialist hoists if needed. I know that children with disabilities sometimes require those, and actually there's been problems in the past, and not in our development, but other problems when there's not a strengthening for that. So that's the first question. Second question, Chair, I'd like to ask Rob probably to sort of clarify this for me. At 6.174 policy S4, the London plan, this bit was seeking to ensure that all children and young people have safe access to good quality play area. The mayoral child space calculator estimated the 280 children will occupy this development, so there was 2,802.3 square metres of play space. From the answer that I've been given, I've understood that just over 1,000 square metres will be provided for children under 5. However, the following 1,000 square metres isn't actually going to be provided on that development at all. It's just being sent to Down Lane Park again. And as I said, I understand that there's going to be some extra things added to that park, but my understanding from this policy is that this actually should be provided on the development. So could you just clarify for us, for the committee, if that's the case, or whether we can send that off to a park somewhere, just to sort of, not have it actually on the development. And then the point around the Lee Valley and the response, it's a bit frustrating because as the council, this is a great opportunity to really make sure that that access to Lee Valley is strengthened in the light of the fact that all the developments here have all added Down Lane Park as their one recreational area. Actually, there's a challenge for us to think bigger and think better, and sort of, if we don't do it now, when is this going to happen? Because the private developments have already taken place. So it's just about improving that, not just the underpass, but actually getting a really nice overpass to that park. That's it, Chair, and I'll just quiet now. Thank you.
Can I come back just on the wheelchair homes? So yes, they will be full wheelchair homes, which includes the joist reinforcement and everything that's required. I think that's all I can answer to.
So yeah, and we obviously have our bespoke housing programme as well. So as we're putting as we get closer to completion, we will be identifying specific residents and designing homes according to their needs, so that day one when they move in, everything will be ready for their home. So we're not going to have to retrofit it sometime after they've moved in.
Thank you. Just to add a point about the underpass. So there are contributions from other schemes that will be put towards what we're going to do with that underpass. So there is a scheme in hand. So there will be some contributions from this scheme, and I believe another scheme that was passed some time ago actually now that will also contribute to that. So the idea is that that underpass becomes much more passable, and the additional advantage of having eyes on that street so that we mitigate against any antisocial behaviour. It also means that the whole scheme facilitates a through cycle route, so you could be cycling through the park, through the actual scheme, which will be only for pedestrian and cycles only, and go straight onto the marshes via the underpass. And the council has just put in a camera on the other side to do that. I think we couldn't possibly build a bridge because we'd have to be dealing with TfL, and it would bust a massive hole in the budget of this particular scheme, believe you me, to try and build a bridge over Network Rail's land. But that underpass will become much safer as a result of this scheme.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Connor. So yeah, really important point about play space. So the report does say that it's only marginally below in terms of what's been quantified and what's been measured so far, but it is expected that is made up on the site. The priority is always for it being provided on site in terms of play on the way, and we can look at that as part of a condition as well. So the design can be looked at as part of that too. I don't know if the case officer wants anything to add to the detail on that, knowing it in a bit more detail than me.
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, it's there is additional young person's play space on the site that hasn't been quantified that we expect to take the quantum over the threshold for younger people. For older children, you can provide, I think it's 11 to 15s, their play space can be provided within 400 metres of the site. And for older children, it can be provided within 800 metres of the site. And there's a substantial financial contribution, over £170,000 towards that being provided. And we expect all of those details to be confirmed at condition stage. So we acknowledge there's a little bit more information to come, but we're confident that there will be enough play space eventually when it gets dealing with that condition.
Thank you. Okay, so I do want to bring this to a close, but are there any last quick questions? Councillor Bevan.
I can't see anything in the conditions about a post-occupancy survey, which I think we talked about at a previous application, not just to survey the residents' views on their heating pumps and God knows what else, but their views of their whole flats and any problems and any lessons to be learned. I don't know if I've missed it, but the condition doesn't seem to be in there.
We'd be happy to be conditioned because we'll be doing it anyway.
Okay, thank you. So, no, okay, all right. So We'll now move to the recommendation, and I would like to ask Robbie McKnocker to confirm the recommendation with a summary of any changes.
Thank you, Chair. Probably just worth some clarification, Councillor Bevan, on what you'd expect that condition to include. And we also need to just assess whether that's meets the tests of a condition. Obviously, the applicant is doing it anyway for our own purposes. So it may not be necessary as a planning condition, but if perhaps you had some more detail of what you'd like included in that, then we can see whether that meets the test and formulate some wording. Yeah, it perhaps might be best as an informative that the applicant carries out a survey of residents. We could put that on, certainly.
Well, it's seen as good practice in the building industry now that all schemes, private developers are doing it as well, just to survey the people who move in and say, did we do this wrong? Could we have done this better? What don't you like? They're pleased to accept it. I think it should be a condition, and it should be set in that way so that it's there for every future scheme that comes from the council.
I believe we were conditioned on this for Cranwood, so we could use the same condition. Change, you know, I would have thought to mandate it for this.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah, I think, Chair, in that case, recommendation is, as set out in the report in the addendum, with an additional condition which we will mirror the Cranwood condition on a resident survey.
Okay, all right. So the recommendation is to grant, and we move to the vote. So all those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So we're just going to adjourn for 5 minutes, but as everybody's had 2 minutes already, we've got 3 minutes left. So if you want to go off for 3 minutes, I should have said at the beginning. Sorry for the delay. We're just waiting for the applicants to get the presentation sorted. Couple more minutes. Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry about the delay. So we're now on to item 9, which is the following application items are pre-application briefings. We're on to item 9. This is Hornsey Police Station, 98 Tottenham Lane, N87EJ, pages 209 to 228. And the proposal is retention of existing police station, building block A with internal refurbishment, rear extensions and loft conversions to create 6 terraced houses and 4 flats. Erection of 2 buildings comprising of Block C along Glebe Road and Harold Road to create 8 flats, and erection of Block B along Tottenham Lane and towards the rear of Tottenham Lane to create 7 flats and 4 Muse houses, including landscaping and other associated works. So I'll hand over to the planning officer, John McCrory, who's online. He's going to introduce the application.
Thank you, Chair. This is a pre-application briefing for members for a proposed residential scheme on the former Hornsey Police Station site. The scheme consists of a conversion of the existing redundant police station, together with the redevelopment of land around it, to create 29 new homes with a mix of houses and flats. For members' context, the site is located on the corner of Harold Road and Tottenham Lane and sits in the Hillfield Conservation Area. The existing former police station building occupying the site is part 2 and part 3 storey in height and L-shaped in form. There are a number of ad hoc single-storey structures on the site to be redeveloped and a car park which is accessed off Harold Road. To date, the scheme has been reviewed by the Quality Review Panel, who are generally supportive of the scheme, and their written comments are attached in the appendix at the end of the report in your agenda. The scheme has also been presented to local residents last week at a development management forum, and residents raised questions and concerns about parking, design, refuse arrangements, amenity impacts and construction. The developer team are going to cover that in a little bit more detail in their presentation. The scheme is now at a stage in the pre-application process where it is appropriate for the developer team to now present it to members tonight for comments and questions. I will now hand over to the developer team, who will present the proposals and who will be able to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the applicants to present to the committee, you have 15 minutes. If you could introduce yourselves, please, first.
Hi, thank you. My name's Chris Boyle. I'm the project architect and director of Arcanium. Yeah, so this is our scheme. What I'm going to do as part of the presentation, as well as just present the scheme itself, is take you through a bit of our design process of how we've arrived at the development that's currently in practice. We go to the next slide, please, Rory. So this is the existing site. As you're right, is the Hornsey Police Station, former Hornsey Police Station. Lovely old red brick Victorian building on the site as outlined by John. It does have some rather unsightly ancillary extensions that have been done to it over time, and it also does sit on quite a large expanse of tarmac car park as well. A key image, if you look up in the top right of there, is this large gap in the street scene that's between the existing police station and the last building on Church Lane, which let's do some investigations to how it's gone like this. If you go to the next slide, please, Rory. So looking at the site history, if you look down at the bottom right image there, that's an older version of the last photo on the previous slide. So you can see on the left-hand side there is the police station, and on the far right it's the last terraced house of Church Lane. In the middle there was these very nice large civic buildings, which was the public library and fire station, which got demolished in the 1960s. So it has left the site looking quite fragmented and disjointed, which we are hoping to remedy with a sort of well thought through and well articulated architectural proposal. To the next slide, please. So looking at the local context and immediate site restraints. So we are, of course, in a conservation area, which we need to be very sensitive to. The scale and proximity of existing buildings, again, we need to be very sensitive to. looking at locations of neighbouring windows and overlooking issues, overshadowing issues, which help dictate the placement of the buildings themselves in relation to the sun path. Another key point is the terrain levels. On the top right-hand corner of the site, if you walk your way around to the bottom left-hand corner, there's about a 2-metre height difference in terrain on that walk. So again, really need to pay attention to the levels with regards to access and thresholds into the buildings too. Next slide, please. So our basic design strategy for this is starting from the existing site. The middle top image there is the demolition of all the more modern unsightly extensions to the police station to bring it back to its former form. Top right image there is getting the levels ready with groundworks in preparation of the new buildings to make sure that access, level thresholds, etc. are all achieved. On the bottom left image there, we need to do a small linear extension to the rear of the police station building, primarily because these will be converted into houses and they just don't achieve the right area with regards to on the housing design guide. And then placing the buildings themselves in the middle bottom image there and going on to the landscaping on the far right. Coming back to the middle bottom image on that one, that's where we placed the buildings on this site, looking at the street topologies as well. So if you can look up where we have Church Lane and Tottenham Lane, and the building lines on this and the street form are very staggered and undulating coming up towards the police station. So we've maintained that form and carried that language through into the footprint design of the new buildings. And similarly, on the bottom left-hand side, where we have Block C, is a different architectural language there. The streets are much more linear, it's a bit more of a more quiet residential area, and as such, the form of the building has been reflected accordingly. And these elements helped inform the design concept of the scheme overall. If you go to the next slide, please. So our design concept is weaving the past and the present, and this has both figurative and literal meanings. I mean, we are literally putting new buildings into a historic site, but it goes a bit further than that. By infilling these gaps, we are weaving back together the urban fabric within the existing townscape and helping bring that street scene back together in a more holistic form, which it did have historically before the civic buildings were demolished. These particular images themselves are actually weaving template boards from Victorian looms. And they've got these lovely geometric, rhythmic patterns to them. Those will be a good point for starting the architectural language. So again, we're using a design template from the past to help inform the actual design language of the present. So next slide, please. So this leads us on to some early stage of looking at the materials and form of the proposed building. So materials-wise, we're thinking brick, the existing police station's brick, a lot of the surrounding areas brick. Obviously, Victorian build methods were primarily brick too, so it seems like the right material to use. But with regards to form, we're taking that concept of weaving a bit more literally, of treating the building fabric quite literally like a fabric and thinking how can it be folded, how can it be creased, how can it be texturalized to create more architectural interest. So more just trying to push the boundaries really of what we can do with brick to rather than just have conventional straight flat brick walls. Next slide, please. So going into the landscaping, this theme of weaving continues into the landscaping elements. So we have got these more geometric patterns for the tiling areas and for the landscape paving stones and other interventions within the site. Taking some inspiration here from the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, which is a very historic landscape site, which has very naturally occurring geometric forms. But unlike the building elements, if you wanted this, because it is a landscape to look to help carry on that theme of weaving, again with these geometric patterns coming in lateral and vertical forms and these extrusions to help replicate that. The spaces at it's quite difficult to see on this side, but at the back of the site is where we have these new Muse houses, and they've got private gardens towards the back. In the foreground of the image, there's private gardens for the new houses that form part of the police station on Harold Road. The boundaries of these, we're keeping a soft boundary. So rather than have more formidable looking 2-meter high walls or something similar to that, we've got these nice green privacy screens, which do the job in terms of delineating between communal and private space, but do work as it helps create the whole landscaping look as one holistic landscaped area. Next slide, please. The scale and massing of the development, very integral that the police station maintains its prominence from a physical perspective on the street scene. We're not wanting to do anything to compete with that from a scale and massing perspective. So block A in green there is the police station building. So that's going to have terraced houses running down Harold Road. The element on the corner of Harold Road and Tottenham Lane would be converted into flats. Block B shown in orange, facing onto Tottenham Lane would be flats, that larger element, and then the new Muse street behind with new Muse houses. And block C on the corner of Harold Road and Glebe Road would be flats. And if you've seen the bottom right image there, when I was mentioning before about taking inspiration from the street scene and the form pattern, you can see how it does stagger out with the existing buildings up Church Lane. There's a very clear pattern to the street, which is again maintained through the new building to help bridge that gap between Church Lane and the police station. Next slide, please. Sorry, back one, if you can. So this is the Tottenham Lane elevation. You can see with the height of the buildings, we are clearly much lower than the police station. We're also no higher than the neighbouring buildings on Church Lane as well. The rhythm of the setup of this, you'll see this a bit clearer on the CGIs later in the presentation, but there's 3 distinct volumes to this facade. Again, the rhythm of that's been set out at the same width as the individual dwellings on Church Lane as well. Next slide, please. And this is seen from the Harold Road elevation. So this is block C on the corner, which is a bit more minimal approach with regards to the architecture here. So this is conceived as not so much an extension to the police station, but more of a continuation of the same architectural form. So the ridge height is maintained, the base of the pitch line is maintained, the heights and setting out of first floor and ground floor windows is also maintained. But rather than it just be a pastiche copy of the police station, it's more of a modern reinterpretation of that traditional vernacular that's used in the police station itself. Next slide. And this is the view from Glebe Road. So again, you see with the scale of the proposed development in relation to the existing context. So we are significantly lower than the fireman's flats and also the edge of the terraced houses continuing north up Glebe Road. And you can see the outline of the police station building in the back there, really bringing it down scale-wise to be more in line with the residential architecture in that immediate local context. Next slide. This is the Muse Street elevation. You'll be able to see the architecture is a bit better on the CGIs later, but the massing of this and the scale of this, again, is significantly lower than the police station you can see in the background. We're also taking inspiration from the topologies of the local streets, where all of the streets around there, from especially Church Lane, Tottenham Lane and Glebe Road, are all sloping downwards as you access it from around the site. So we've incorporated a slight slope on the Muse Street as well. This also has a few other benefits. The stepping down of the Muse houses helps differentiate exactly where each house starts and finishes. It gives it its own unique form. But also, once you get to the edge of the site boundary, to the boundary there with the fireman's flats, that it reduces the overall mass at the boundary of the proposal. So this minimises daylight, sunlight and overlooking infringements on neighbouring properties as well. Next slide. So this is our proposed scheme as it stands as a ground floor plan. So starting at the back there with the Muse Street at the top of the image, those purple dwellings are all 4-bed Muse houses. Overall, we've got quite a range of property topologies within the development, with an emphasis on family-sized housing. So we do have 1-bed flats, 2-bed flats, 3-bed flats, as well as 3 and 4-bedroom houses. Those Muse houses in purple have got their private gardens at the back. That accesses onto the communal space shown in white there. That pattern's reflected on the townhouses in the police station on Harold Road, which all have private access into their own gardens, again into the communal access as well. And block C on the corner there is all flatter development. The ground floor flats do have their own amenity space, and the upper floor flats have balconies, which you see. The brown highlighted areas facing the street are the refuse stores. We've proposed these to be in between the blocks, these low-level, low-height installations as connecting pieces between the police station and the proposed blocks. This works from a functionality perspective. They can be shared communal spaces that can be directly accessed from the street with refuse collection, which avoids the need for having a refuse vehicle having to drive in and enter the site and turn around, which would wipe out a lot of the area for landscaping. Next slide. Simply just the first floor of the developments. You can see on the back of where the police station is in yellow, that on the extension side, we're integrating that staggered elevation design onto the facade of that block. So again, it echoes the facades of the Muse houses and the rear of the blocks, rear of the elevations on Block B. This primarily, so from the street, that traditional look, because the building is being restored, is maintained, but from within the site, there is a holistic architectural language that unifies the scheme. Next slide, please. Going up to the floors, you have the top floors here of the Muse houses and townhouses, and the dark blue elements are two larger 3-bed family units as flats as well. Next slide, please. And on the element there of Block B in blue, that's the only part of the scheme that is 3rd floor. Everything else is only up to two floors, 2 stories. Okay, next slide, please. So accommodation-wise, I appreciate you probably can't read that on the side of the screen, but we've made an emphasis to try and design the units with as much air as we can to rather than just scrape through on minimum standards. I think only 2 of the units proposed meet the London Housing Design Code standards, and all the other 27 are in excess of minimum standards. So this equates to just over 2,000 square feet in additional gross internal area for all the residential units. There are no single aspect units proposed at all. They're all double. We have 3 wheelchair units provided, which would be 2 of the houses in Block A and a flat in Block B. We've currently proposed 28% affordable units, which will be the flats in Block C. We have done an early draft for viability assessment for this, which was submitted to the council. We need to make some amendments to it now as we've changed the overall quantum of development. But it's worth noting the actual advice we received from a viability perspective is that the site couldn't house more than 4 affordable units. But obviously, we want to try and escalate that as much as we can. So we've doubled that to 8 in its current format, which constitutes 28%. So we do appreciate we're a little bit short of the minimum standards of 35. But again, this will be ironed out through a proper viability process through the planning application. Next slide, please. Consultant reports. We've done numerous consultant reports already, flood risk assessments, transport assessments, daylight sunlight, fire statements, which will all be submitted as part of the full application. Just think with the time we have for the presentation, there is a lot probably to talk about with the local public concerns, especially with transport and parking and daylight sunlight, but maybe we'll come on to those in sort of discussion afterwards. So next slide, please. Energy and sustainability. Again, we've worked on this right from the get-go with this scheme to have our energy assessor looking at this from early drafts to make sure that the energy strategy is as accurate as we can. We're as a council target to have a reduction of CO2 emissions for further reduction of 35%. As currently modelled, we have a reduction of 40.25%. So again, we are in excess of what we need to do here. And we do have an energy strategy backed up with regards to communal power as well.
Right, that's your time up. So ask questions and then maybe you can bring out anything else. So do members have any questions to the applicant or the planning officer? And that's Councillor White to start off with.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my questions are on how this proposed development fits in with Council Policy DM 49 on the provision and quality of community infrastructure. So first of all, to officers, my understanding is that this in planning terms, currently this is classed as being a police station and therefore in community use. So my question would be, does DM 49, is that only relevant to this in terms of its continued use as a police station, or would the policy also ask for attempts to be made to find some other kind of community use? And if so, what other kind of community uses would be acceptable? And my question to the applicant is in Policy DM 49, it says that evidence needs to be provided that the premises have been marketed for use as a community facility for a minimum of 12 months and that no suitable user has been or is likely to be found. So my question to the applicant is what has been done on this front so far? What kind of community facility have you been marketing it as, and what plans for for the future do you have on this front? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of your first question, the police station is a community use, and the policy requires it to be sought as other community uses, so nurseries, things like that, doctor surgeries, dental surgeries. So the applicant in their sort of cascade of options should be looking at an alternative community use before they look at anything else.
With regards to marketing, from the stage of when the site was purchased, there was a previous pre-app done by the agent, effectively. But I'd outlined the change of use from that, and it was supported by the council at a stage that change to residential use was supported off the scheme. And there wasn't anything within that feedback or any clarifications further on any application process we've done to have anything to do with further marketing as a community. It's already been established from the early pre-app stages that it's supported as a change of use in its current application form to be from police station to residential.
In that case, Chair, with your permission, Chair, could I just ask officers if that indeed is in accordance with this policy? What's been stated by the applicant?
Yes, I'll take that. If that hasn't been set out clearly in the previous pre-app advice, that wouldn't satisfy the policy. So we would need to see evidence that it has been marketed, or other evidence such as that the layout or the design mean it's not feasible. So we'll have to discuss that further with the applicant.
As to say.
Yeah, looking at the side elevation along Tottenham Lane, the new building hasn't got a flat roof. Why hasn't it got a pitch roof to fit in with the others?
We didn't want to do a sort of more of a past use copy to exactly replicate local buildings. So for the form of that has been taken from, firstly, from this concept of weaving, looking at the old Victorian layout patterns, which help with this nice geometric form within the facade. The undulations of that are also taking inspiration from the local context. So if you can see on the buildings off Church Lane, that there are these protrusions out with bay windows and protrusions at high level. Similarly, the police station itself has various setbacks and protrusions as well for porches and all low-level roof elements. So we wanted to take inspiration from the site and from the local context, but we wanted to emanate that in a more contemporary architectural proposal, rather than look to do kind of like for like copies, so to speak, of architectural features.
Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of questions. One is around, you mentioned residents' concerns, and they said to you about the daylight, and you sort of whipped through that really quickly. So what concerns have residents already come back to around daylight and sunlight, and also the parking? And the other bit I had was, you say you're looking to do affordable housing. So obviously, for the council, we're looking to have sort of affordable housing, sort of the council's affordable housing, or social housing. So what's the what ability would you have to provide any form of sort of social housing on this site, in other than the affordable housing that you've got currently referenced in your plan? Thank you.
So taking those one at a time. So on the daylight sunlight, we have done a daylight sunlight assessment of the scheme done by a third-party consultant. They've just issued a statement. They're still fine-tuning the actual report, but they've done all the findings. And this was issued to the council earlier today. And it does conclude that all regulations with regards to BRE guidelines are met, and there are no daylight sunlight infringements with regards to overshadowing any of the neighbouring properties. With regards to parking and transport, again, we have done a transport assessment. They have carried out a parking stress survey and issued a full transport assessment report. Again, that's also been issued to the council. And the conclusions of that are that there are enough spaces within the local parking network to house the parking requirements for this scheme. It's worth noting as well that we aren't proposing that the full scheme has access to the parking network, only the family-sized units as well, which I think constitute 12 units overall. It is worth noting as well that I say historically, it's only about sort of 6-7 months ago, but the entire length of Harold Road adjacent to the police station was designated as police parking that wasn't part of the local planning network. And that could house 9 to 10 parking spaces along that road. And it has since now been taken and adopted into the local parking network. But if we're proposing 10 to 12 car parking spaces as part of this site, and the flats would not be allowed, and we're also, by way of that, bringing that area of road back into the parking network, the offset is the same, give or take a car or two. So we're proposing that basically the existing and more previous existing and proposed parking facilities are the same with or without the scheme. And the last point on affordable, the short answer on affordable is it is still to be concluded. We are putting together we are amending our viability assessment, and we are right at the start of those discussions really with the council. So the exact quantum and type of affordable housing and the exact tenure associated with each of those is something we do need to conclude as part of the planning process.
Councillor Batten.
With that small number of affordable housing, you're not going to get any housing association interested in taking on their management. So what's the solution to that? Would they be taken by the council, or how would you deal with that problem?
I think it's the same response as before. I think there are some housing associations that will take smaller units, which we need to have in discussions with, but there is the option potentially of the council taking them too. But I think we do need to move it a bit further with regards to viability as well, because as I say, even though we have currently got it as 8, we need to conclude the overall viability assessment on this. And I think when we actually do have a final number of agreed units and the exact topologies associated with them, we'll be better informed as to who the end user of these will be.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the waste and waste spaces that are inside the proposed thing. There's the 29 units, accommodation units. Don't know what kind of size space that is. You said that there'd be obviously no need for lorries to go in, but where that property is at the top of a hill with a zebra crossing, a junction. There's cars coming all directions. So I'm just wondering, what the proposal is for that, and there's going to be challenges for waste collection vehicles in that precise location out the front of the police station because of the nature of that road. That's going to cause traffic issues on an already busy road.
So with regards to the bin stores themselves and the refuse quantities of them, they've all been calculated in line with the council's requirements. So all of the literage for general refuse, recycling, food waste is all calculated and drawn in with the appropriate bin sizes within all of those drawn bin stores. So spatially wise, we're meeting everything we need to do. With regards to collection, the collection proposed being off the street is as per the existing conditions for all of those local roads. So at the moment, say for example, coming up Glebe Road, where everything's all terraced houses, also with cars parked along there, the refuse vehicle simply drives up and collects everything from the frontage of each of those dwellings. And it's the same situation on Harold Road as well. So we're proposing simply just to keep the same setup. It's still road-based vehicle refuse collection taken directly from the street. But we thought go back to if we did do an alternative to drive into the site, because I think a big selling point of this scheme is the landscaping as well. We found as well that the Haringey is Hornsey is the least green ward in Haringey. So I think doing any element to try and increase green areas and biodiversity is quite a key attribute. So I think prioritising that over a different refuse scheme is.
Yeah, sorry. My point, I guess, was less about having a drive-through, more on board for not doing that, but more about the increased number of bins at that exact point on that road, meaning that lorries are going to be stopped. Yeah, at quite a busy junction at the top of sort of round Tottenham Lane and all of that.
With the travel and transport assessment we've done, it does highlight for the refuse vehicle collections. It does talk about congestion as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what the word for word elements are within that, but it has been covered and has been looked at. But again, because we have only really just submitted this as well, it needs to be reviewed by the Council Highways Department. And if the Highways Department does have any comments on that or any other suggestions for alternative positions or collection measures, then we're more than happy to listen to those and accommodate those if required.
Okay, so do members have any other questions? So we've got Councillor Bartlett and then Councillor Connor.
Thank you. The Quality Review Panel has picked up on a couple of design elements with Block C and Block B, particularly the height of Block B, and also talking about making Block C, I think, look more interesting. Are those things that you're taking on board, and are you making any changes because of that?
Yes, we have made some reviews since the Quality Review Panel. Block C. Previously, we didn't have these dormers on board, and we also didn't have these low-level planted elements. And there's also we don't have a CGI showing the view, but there's a different brick treatment as well on the other flank elevation of this block too. But the overall architecture of this was deliberately a bit more minimal, because we did actually have a more exuberant design for Block C in a very earlier iteration of this at the first pre-app. And from discussions with the council and the council's design officers, we've made this to be a little bit more of a minimal approach to the architecture. And whilst it is minimal, there's a big difference, which we've explained to local residents as well, between minimal and simple. This definitely isn't a straightforward building. We've got these other brick extrusions, as you can see between the windows, which take inspiration from the little brick extrusion elements on the police station on the corner. We've got these rather decorative textured brick elements to help define the entrance. And the roof as well is also brick. It's a continuation of brick staggered elements right onto the pitched roof too, with a secret hidden gun system and these projecting zinc dormers. So whilst it is deliberately meant to look more of a minimal building, to be more in keeping with the proportions and material qualities of the block, it's by no means a simple building. There's a lot of very key minimal architectural details on that are quite complex from a design and execution perspective.
You, Councillor Connor.
So I was just going to echo Councillor Bartlett's question really, but I think honing in on the conservation area and picking up on the heritage building. Now you can see the two windows. I'm afraid I do like the older windows, the sash windows. Those to me do to sort of stand the test of time. So I'm just thinking from a conservation perspective, what further work are you going to be doing to sort of ascertain the views of local people? I know there's a Crouch End neighbourhood forum around what conservation you think, what a building that's appropriate within a conservation area would look like. And you said you've already gone through a number of iterations. Are there more to come, or is this your final offer in respect, or are you going back to sort of take on board any other comments that might be made by residents because of this area and the police station? Thank you.
So in terms of seeking advice, we do have a heritage consultant on board as well, and they are providing a heritage assessment as part of this. And they've given us a lot of comments throughout the design process of what they feel is suitable and not suitable. Primarily as well also with regards to the police station building itself, with regards to what materials to use, window restoration, etc. too. So all of those comments have been maintained and taken on board. With regards to design, and it's a difficult one because even with the public, there's a split decision. Like you can't find one design approach that pleases everybody. With the feedback we have had a lot of positive feedback on the proposed buildings, both for Block B and for Block C. Similarly, but for for a lot of comments that we do get positive, you do get people that might not like it. So for example, on Block C, there's a lot of public comments. So we've got these recorded as well from public consultation events that we've held that do support strongly this particular design. We've got other comments that say we'd like to see it more traditional in line with the police station. And we've got other comments to say go even further and make it more exuberant or more architecturally styled. So we can't, when we receive comments, obviously we have to get balance right, and we have to do what we feel is appropriate architecturally as well. And we can't just think these people have suggested this, let's do that, or these people said let's change it to this, because it's impossible to get a holistic architectural approach like that. So I think the reasons for this, how we've come up with this form and how we've come up with this particular styling, are very well informed by the local context from a design perspective and through feedback from the local community and the council's design officers and the council's heritage officers and our own heritage consultants. So as it stands now, yes, this is the proposed scheme, and the feedback we've had from the council, both in terms of design officers and heritage, are in support of this particular block especially.
Councillor Over.
Just looking at the kind of the internal landscaping, the one I'm looking at is on page 221. I mean, aesthetically, I know there's been a lot of concentration about the aesthetics of it and making it look pleasing aesthetically. But in terms of like going on to what Councillor White said about the use of it being a community facility possibly, and also in terms of the residents' needs, like it doesn't look like there's any seating or any way that they can utilize that area. Just wondering whether any thought has been put into how it could be better utilized by the residents.
Yeah, sure. So what we're wanting to do with the landscaping is there are seating areas on these raised and sunken undulating sculptural forms. So these hexagonal block elements can be used as benches, seating areas, even stages for kids to run around on. And we want the whole central area to be like a congregation space of social interaction. That's where, I mean, every residential unit has access to it. Whether or not they've got a private garden, or whether it's affordable, it's a place where all residents can go and congregate. And we think this central element of it being very well overlooked for natural surveillance with access from all blocks, and the sort of less conventional, I guess, methods of putting in, say, benches or other conformed seating, or specifically designed areas, we want it to be quite free flowing, and where people can go through it. There's different places to stop. So there's to stand and congregate, sit and congregate. So it's quite a free-flowing area in that respect, rather than just have a simply designed, this is a seating area, this is a potential play area, and zone it off. We want it to be more integrated in that sense.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. I did ask at the last meeting whether we could have examples of the finished material. By that I mean the materials that the property will be finished with. Say, for instance, we've been having a little discussion with bricks. So let's have various types of bricks that might be applied, or cladding or whatever it may be, and we can then decide, in our view, which is the better, or upon your advice, which is the better.
Yeah, I do note that you raised that last time, and I think my feedback was that if it was on a listed building or something very sensitive, where the brick choice was absolutely fundamental, we would certainly bring that along. I don't think we've got that tonight as part of this pack. We wouldn't normally ask for a pre-app because it would be even further from being decided. But yeah, should there be an opportunity where we feel that bringing a brick along or some details of materials, we certainly can do that.
Any more questions? No? Okay, right. So Can I thank the applicant for attending the meeting? Thank you.
Can I make one more point? So just a reminder, I think going back onto the use classification of the building with community, I think there's another point that was allocated in the first pre-app that was done, that it is officially allocated as sui generis rather than community as the police station. Saying that might be hence why there wasn't any requirement to demonstrate any marketing for a particular time frame, 12 months, because it wasn't allocated officially as community use, it was sui generis.
Okay, we'll need to look back at that pre-app advice, but yeah, there is a definition in the development plan that sets out what we consider to be a community use, so we can have a look at that.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for attending the meeting. I'll now move on to item 10, which is items of urgent business. There are no new items of urgent business. Item 11, date of the next meeting is the 21st of July 2022, and I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.